What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Noa Eshed. She is the founder of Bold Digital. Noa, I'm going to formally introduce you in a second, but I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. This is part of the Top Agency series. It's also part of the Top Israel Business Leader series. So from the agency side, I had Jason Swank on. Jason Swank talked about how he built his agency to 8 figures and sold it. And then he was buying up agencies. Then he has an agency group, the group that he wished he had, Noa, when he started his agency, helping agency owners grow. So that was a really good one. Actually, there's 2 episodes on that. Another good one was Todd Taskey. Todd Taskey helps pair agencies to private equity. So he helps sell agencies, and he has a Second Bite podcast. Second Bite because he found sometimes when the founders sold to private equity and private equity sold again, they would make more on the second bite than they did on the first. So that was a really interesting in the business, valuation space, M&A space, agency space. That was a great one. On the Israel Business Leader series, I had Moise Navon of Mobileye. If you're in Israel, you know Mobileye. If you're not, you probably know Mobileye. They were actually acquired by Intel for $15.3 billion. I think when I talked to him, no, I made the mistake of saying 15.2. And he's like, Jeremy, it's 15.3. I'm like, okay, that decimal does make a difference, I guess. What was interesting about his story was actually just the journey was ups and downs. And there was a lot of times where they had to go and sacrifice along the way. He had to go back to his family at one point and say, hey, we can't do extracurriculars. There's no more eating out. There's no more niceties because we're in the lean phase of this thing. So that and many more on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. And Noah, you know this. We're kind of like the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the host so they can create amazing content, create amazing relationships, most importantly, run their business. You know, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I have found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire on this planet and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, go ahead. By the way,
I got to hand it to you that you're a master at networking, because I think it's thanks to you that we've been in touch for years. And it's just every once in a while, and it always seems so genuine. You reach out, you just send this short email with how are you? What are you up to these days? How do you feel? And it's always like, it's so efficient and heartwarming. So thank you for that. And I learned from it.
Thank you. Yeah. And not only does it seem genuine, but it is genuine. But no, I like to, you know, keep in touch with people just to see how they're doing, see how I can help. And obviously, you know, I'm going to talk about knowing they have a podcast. So I always like to recommend, I love when my friends have podcasts because I get to recommend guests to them. And it's a give to the guests to feature them. It's a give to the show to connect with more great people. So if you thought about podcasting, we're going to talk about Noah's. You should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email support@rise25.com. And Noah is really amazing at relationships too. You are a master too. I learned from you. You are very quick to respond. You know, sometimes I may not hear from people for months, and you're like amazing with your communication. So I am excited to introduce Noa Eshed, founder of Bold Digital. They help you scale your B2B tech startup through trust, and we'll get into what that means. She was actually recognized as a thought leader by the Daily Telegraph. Her book, The Smart Marketer's Guide to Google AdWords, was an Amazon #1 bestseller. And her podcast, Real Life Superpowers, is ranked in the top 10% globally and is featured on CTech, Israel's largest business newspaper. And she actually previously co-founded and distributed Israel's only national magazine for students. And of all things, she thought she was going to be a lawyer someday and practice law. So that's interesting as well. Noah, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. By
Let's
the way, not that I practice, but I am a lawyer. Like I did the whole, I did the whole
yes.
journey and then left.
Yes, corrected. I stand corrected. John, my business partner, calls himself a recovering lawyer. So I'm like, he used
Yeah,
to
I
be a
love
lawyer.
that.
He's like, I'm still a lawyer, Jeremy. I just don't practice. I'm like,
Yeah, don't
got it.
take it from me. I suffered enough.
Yeah, exactly. Let's start off with Bold Digital and what you do. And there is a video piece. So if someone's listening to the audio, they will be able to. I'm going to pull up Bold Digital and we'll take a look. So talk about Bold Digital and what you do.
Of course. So basically, what we do is we have helped B2B tech startups to grow, and we do it based on the assumption that if you try to grow a B2B tech startup through advertising, through trying to pitch and sell, rather than through educating and adding value and positioning the startup and the founders as domain experts, then you're probably going to be wasting a lot of money. So we double down on the currency of trust, and we do that through content marketing. So basically, we help the founders and also the brand create content that helps position them as domain experts, and we help the startup become a category leader, at least to be positioned as such. And I don't mean at least in the sense that it's not, but we help the startup actually convey what they know so that people will trust them. And that's really important because in B2B tech, the sales cycles are very long and they require a lot of trust and multiple decision makers. And then if you don't have that trust, and if you believe that you can just advertise, do a banner, do a display ad, just go to Google and do some sort of target some keywords and try to get people to click and then convert. Very early on in the process, I mean, I hope for you that it's early on, you're going to be realizing that you're wasting a lot of money and that people do not convert into customers that way. And the way to convert people into customers is exactly through what you said, relationships. And relationships, the foundation of those is trust. So that's what we try to help do.
I do, I did notice scale your B2B tech startup through trust and talk a little bit about the currency of trust.
So a startup is, at least in the beginning, not known. And when you couple that with the fact that the sales cycles are going to be complex and that they're probably going to be costly, in order to start a relationship with a startup and a B2B tech startup, you're going to probably have to pay them a lot of money to use what they sell you. So people are not going to hurry. The target audience does not hurry to buy from a company that they don't know. So the idea here is to see how they now take this anonymous company and get acquainted with it in a way that isn't interruptive, in a way that they learn from it and get a positive impression that they are experts, that they know what they're talking about, and it's worthwhile to evaluate and consider them as the go-to solution to what they're looking for.
I do want to dig into kind of the evolution of Bold a little bit. Let's start with the niche for a second. B2B tech. When you first started, what was some of the companies that you worked with, and how did it evolve to B2B tech for you?
That's a really good question. And you're nailing it because we definitely didn't start that way. We started pretty broad. I'll go back a bit. So as we discussed, I studied law, and then I decided I don't want to do that. And then I started doing two things after I decided I'm leaving the law behind. A was to found the National Student Magazine, and at the same time I was also dabbling with marketing. And what I was doing, it was just at the era where Facebook started with company pages. So before that, there wasn't even a way to really establish a presence on Facebook as a brand. And I was lucky to be one of the first, at least in Israel, who was doing that. So I was working with a chain of magazines, not mine. Mine was a magazine for students. And I was working with a few fashion brands, all B2C, and I was helping them establish a presence. And I learned a lot through that. And I was also working on my magazine, which was a huge failure. But it was also it was a business failure. But it was also a great experience to A, understand business, and B, to understand content. So I was growing an understanding of the power of content through those experiences. And then we also added the layer of PPC to the equation. And we started understanding what's effective there and what isn't. And the next stage was we discovered HubSpot and everything that they had to offer with respect to educating the market. And they were educating agencies, they were targeting people like us. So I learned a lot about marketing and how to do it right from HubSpot. And that was a fantastic use case for me to understand how this can be done in an effective way, because we were also trying, to advertise and promote companies through ads and through what we knew as PPC and media in general. And things started clicking, and we started getting that understanding and honing what the best and most effective ways to promote and grow a company are. So it was through trial and error, which I believe is always true for marketing. I just believe that there are best practices that you learn along the way, but it's also so agile because everything is so dynamic in this landscape and there's new technologies, but there are fundamentals. And with time, there was this understanding that evolved that B2B tech is where we can add the most value, and that the currency would be trust, and would be doing that through content, quality content.
So Noah, it's an interesting journey. And by the way, we will talk about, you do have an interesting HubSpot story, which we'll talk about. But you went from lawyer, B2C, magazine, and then B2B, B2B tech. Do you remember the first kind of B2B or one of the first B2B tech companies that was a major milestone for you that maybe put the ideas like we could really help, we should really zone in on this type of client?
Yeah, I won't name the company, but it was a startup that we really experienced how through doing the research of what they're doing and then doing the research of the target audience and then seeing how we put content out there. And that was the era actually that gated content was the way to go. So we were doing campaigns with gated content, purely educational content about the industry, and people were downloading it. And then we created funnels out of it. And we saw how people are progressing through the funnels, like really in a linear way, which by the way, I wouldn't recommend now, but what worked then won't work now. That's a fact. But it was a holistic understanding that this works if you do it right. And we saw how tweaking things and having a feedback loop enabled us to do it right.
And for people who don't know, gated, it means like they have to opt in, right? Like you have to put an email or
Beyond
maybe a
opting
phone
in,
number. Yeah.
you have to provide it's a way of opting in, but it's not like you're opting in order to get the specific piece of content that is gated in a landing page typically.
You were saying not all of that works today. What part of that does work, or what are best practices now with that?
So it used to be the case, or at least we
Because
perceived.
the reason I ask, I'm gonna let you finish that thought, but I am looking at your website and I love you do have an opt-in on there if people, and I'm gonna subscribe to it because I think it's pretty cool and we'll talk about it. But you can see on Bold Digital, if you go, they practice what they preach here, right? So you can get the ultimate 2025 B2B tech conferences spreadsheet, right? And if you go to that page, you will give your email, first name, last name for some valuable information that they've curated for you. And if I'm a B2B tech company, that's something I would want to know. So talk about gated versus non
Yeah,
in today's
yeah.
world.
So I actually am not a fan of gating content any longer, but I think there are exceptions
Yeah.
because what I was starting to say earlier that doesn't work any longer as much as probably did earlier in previous days is that the funnel isn't linear. So we cannot assume that there's this person who is a lead and now they will download a piece of content and now you can nurture them through stages and get them to buy. Because the understanding is that it doesn't work that way. And you cannot push people through a funnel and get them to generate intent that they don't have. So the premise is that instead of looking at it as a linear funnel, we should understand that we need to be there, to show up consistently with quality content, adding value, and then we will be considered as a solution when they're ready to buy. So the intent and the readiness to buy and the need won't happen at a click of our button. And I think many companies ditch along the way because they assume that it's either people will click now and buy or won't. And it's just not the case. It's more complex and it requires more investment, but it pays off. So with respect to the content that I gated on my website, basically my team and I worked for long hours on creating a spreadsheet that details all the events in many different industries in 2025. And we did it purely to add value. And the thought was to gate it so that we do grow our database. So we're able to send emails to them, but it's not salesy emails at all. Like we send them newsletters and more educational content with an assumption, again, that when they're ready, if they need the solution, they will reach out. And if they won't, then they can also forward this to somebody else who may.
I'm curious, Noah, on that. I'm sure, whenever something that's on a website, I know people sat around the table, they thought long and hard before going in that direction. I'm curious, what else was on the table that you considered building for that download, right? You ultimately came to B2B tech conferences are valuable. What else were you considering?
To be honest, there wasn't anything else. It was more a situation where I was seeing a need for this, and I realized we can answer it. So it wasn't even strategized as let's see how we can generate leads. It's just not even the mindset. The mindset is always let's be on the lookout for things where we can add value, and through that we know that things will fall into place because they simply do. So it wasn't a discussion about let's brainstorm what other tactics. It wasn't a tactical discussion.
So you just found people were asking you this question, or you saw it like, being
Even.
asked in a lot of different places online?
And I also saw it sometimes lacking with clients. So I saw that they don't necessarily have a mega database of
Yeah.
events.
Obviously, if people want to get the ultimate 2025 B2B or whatever year it is, B2B tech conferences, they have to don't download it. What are a few of your favorites that people should check out?
What, for the events?
Yeah, a few of your favorite tech conferences.
So it depends on what industry, but for advertising and marketing, it's definitely DigiDay. But beyond it, the value of this spreadsheet, as we intended it to be, is not just to know that there's an event, but actually map out all the opportunities that go along with it, because sometimes that's the missed opportunity. So sometimes companies may be aware of an event, but they may not be aware of the sponsorship opportunities in that event. Or the keynote opportunities that they can submit. And the idea was to help them wrap this up in a way where they can make sure that they're leveraging. They're spending so much money on events, and sometimes they get drowned in the day-to-day, so they don't do the full research. And then things drop where they can really be leveraged.
You have an interesting story regarding HubSpot in a conference. Can you talk about sometimes what you do to get amazing guests on your podcast? This is one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, of course. So when we started the podcast, we did research for like a year, and we were aiming really high for the podcast and the quality of it. A, because we have to walk the talk, and the quality just has to be good enough. And B, because this was a fascinating journey for us, and the purpose of the podcast is to interview some of the world's top performers so that we're able to bridge a gap between what's perceived as success in the media and on social media and real life. And we wanted to show that at the end of the day, it's all human beings, that some are just overcoming challenges because there's always going to be challenges. And some are deciding, to not try. And we wanted to encourage people to tap into their own superpowers, quote unquote, and just get in the arena. So the agency was a HubSpot partner agency, and I was at a conference, a partner conference in Ireland. And Brian Halligan, the co-founder CEO at the time of HubSpot, was speaking on stage. And I decided I want to go up to him and invite him to be the first guest on the podcast. And People at the table were telling me, listen, you're delirious. There's no way he's going to be like, the podcast doesn't even exist. And this is like a mega speaker, keynotes, whatever. He's not going to say yes. And I just came up to him as soon as he got off the stage and I said, hi, I'm not from Israel. I'm a partner agency. I think I said we also won the Impact Awards, which is an award that we won of HubSpot a while before. And I said, I'm starting a podcast and I'd love for you to be a guest. And he said yes. And even when he did, I wasn't sure it's going to happen till it did. He told me, he gave me an email to reach out to. So I was writing it and I was really anxious. I was refreshing like my email to see it's going to happen. And it ended up happening and it was fantastic. And of course, it also opened up the road for other guests at his caliber. So that made things easier. But still, of course, nothing is smooth sailing, as we say in the podcast. So the tactic at the first years of the podcast was really to actually go to keynote speakers at the end of their talk. Before they even take off the mic, still like they're still pumped from their talk, and just present myself. And really, like surprisingly, it was always a surprise. I have to be honest that they never said no. Like they always said, yeah, sure, we'll be a guest. Like the only two people that said no to me that I can recall is what's his name? Gary Goldman, the comedian that I heard on the James Altucher show. I saw him randomly on the street in New York, and I just came up to him and I asked him if he maybe wants to go on my podcast, and he told me, no, I don't do podcasts, which I knew wasn't true because I learned of him through the James Altucher show. And then there was Michael Che from Saturday Night Live. I was at a stand-up show of his. He came up on an improv night or something, and I came up to him right after his show, and I think he was quite drunk. And
You thought you had a better chance.
so I came up to him and I said, "Do you maybe want to go on my podcast?" And he said, "No, but I'll listen to your podcast." So I told him, "We both know you won't, but thanks." And he looked at me like, "Okay." I think he thought it was rude, and we parted ways. But those are the two that I can remember. And I gotta tell you, I believe in a sense it was my mindset coming up to them because I didn't feel that they're really the target people to interview in the first place. So I wasn't believing it myself. When you sell something that you believe in, you convey some magic that you don't when you don't.
Yeah, I love that. And that's why you call it bold digital. You're just bold. You'll go up and that I love, feeding off the adrenaline. They have that high from the talk. And it is bold, from the HubSpot piece because it was your first episode. Even if it wasn't your first episode, it was bold, but he was your first episode. I guess you don't have much luck with comedians, but like you said, it's not in your target audience. I remember I don't know if you know Elon Gold, his comedy, but I had him on. He maybe would say yes to you, but he was fantastic. But who are some of your favorite guests that over the years that you've had on the show?
That is such a difficult question. I can see one on the screen right now, actually, which was he was fascinating. Henry DeCio, the former deputy assistant to President Obama. That's also surreal to me that I get all these PR people to reach out to me and pitch guests that are people like the former deputy assistant to President Obama. And it's just really fascinating to me to speak to those people who really climbed to heights that are not traditional in any sense. I love it when people think out of the box and sort of create realities and take part in things that like the Obama I'll call it movement became so huge. So it's like really moving the needle at a global scale. So I love that. There was also there's Brian Halligan, obviously that was an episode I'll never forget. There's Anastasia Stepanova. She's a space journalist and a human test subject on a Mars mission, which we'll probably hear of again these days with the election and Elon Musk. But that's also fascinating, like a person who's willing to be a human test subject. That's insane to me. And there was one episode that touched me, that stayed with me, is Andy Ram. He was, I think, number one in tennis. I think I think that's the title. I can't remember what year. And I just was blown away by his optimism. So we spoke quite early when the war broke out here. And we even had to pause the recording because we had rockets fired at us and we had to take shelter. And the man was so positive. It was just like a breath of fresh air to speak to him. Like I remember getting empowered by talking to him because he was saying like the glass, if people tell him that the glass is half empty, he says just get a bigger glass.
Yeah, I'm sure during those times it's especially important to hear words of optimism as well.
Yeah, like from somebody in the trenches with you. So it's yeah,
I
it's
see one, Hello Fold. How was that one?
he's great. Hills is really great. He's like Israel's unofficial tech ambassador. It's packed with value. He's all about like also tech hacks, which was impressive. He taught me how to get on your iPhone to get all these shortcuts. So if you put like two words, then that fills up to a full word. Saves a lot of time. He's a very smart man.
Talk about, no, we talked about kind of the evolution of the niche for a second, and you are very clear about your ideal client, which is interesting. It's not only just tech, you do serve startups, but also they have to be funded startups. So it's not,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, so that they can actually grow, right? With you need funds to grow, obviously.
Yeah.
Talk about from the services side, right? It sounded like you went through a journey on that side from like content to PPC. Talk about the services journey a bit.
So it was really about honing it and realizing that if, for example, a tech startup spends less money on ads, then they can use that money for actions that can have more impact. But then also realizing that if you take the content that you create, then you can amplify it, and then you can get more relevant people to see the content. So there was always like a process of honing the services from what seems to work best. And it's not that straightforward because you keep on reading and educating yourself and learning and seeing what works. And it's actually, I'll say this, something that's not PC, but it's sometimes also misleading because, for example, HubSpot, which I'm a fan of HubSpot, but they were preaching and educating that pretty much if you write the content and you put it out there, then Google, you're gonna rank on search engines as if SEO is pretty much just gonna happen if you click a few buttons, use your interface, optimize a bit for on-site, which means basically the technicalities of the website page. Maybe create pillar content, meaning to create one piece of content and then content supporting it, and you start it because it seems so convincing. And with time, you realize it's just not as straightforward because there's more elements to consider, and life really isn't as simple as what perhaps the HubSpot Academy want you to think. I remember actually speaking on stage at a partner day of HubSpot. They invited me to talk about our agency and our experience, and I remember telling the new agencies there that HubSpot will have you think that it's enough to do that, but it seems that Google didn't take the HubSpot Academy. So that's you just hit reality, and then you self-correct. But I think it's always about self-correcting. Like, I think in marketing, you can't afford to be static, and you can't afford to put honestly anything on autopilot. I think once you do, it's a matter of time before things decline. So that's pretty much the evolution of always understanding what's the best value you can bring, but from a perspective of what you do, but from a perspective also of the industry, of competition. It's there's never a one size fits all solution, and I believe that matters because I'll tell you this. I was thinking that such an agency is something that is so scalable because you can you can build pods and you can teach people what to do and almost put it on autopilot. And I realized that that's not what I'm selling. I realized I'm selling a boutique agency where my knowledge is taking the central stage, and that the idea here is to now see how to bring the best value through my experience and together with my team to see how we can create the best presence for our clients. But that was part of the evolution of the services to really understand that I believe you can't scale a boutique to levels of automated services.
I'd love to know about some of your mentors in business and what you've learned from them. And it could be, obviously personal mentors, but it could be also distant mentors, right? I know James
Yeah,
Altucher has
yeah,
influenced you
that's
and other people, but
sure.
um, both categories. Maybe start with James Altucher and what
Yeah,
you learned from him.
great. That's really the first name that came to my mind because I listened to his podcast and I also read his book, Choose Yourself, and I realized that I'm really I believe in what he's preaching, that you need to remove the gatekeepers in your life and just move forward. So I think that it's true that you don't need to start at the end of the line and then climb up some sort of ladder that either society creates or a specific company. And you know what? Sometimes also is in our head. So I think the largest thing that I learned from him is to remove the gatekeepers and wherever you can be the media, so don't try, instead of trying to get accepted, create the platform. Like, for example, with our podcast, we just made it happen and then things fall into place, right? So that's what I learned from James Altucher. Wow, I listen to a lot of podcasts and I read a lot of books. So for every book I take something, and I also in my iPhone notes I actually write down everything that I want to take away from what I've read. But books like such as the Lean Startup, I think that's fantastic. I think it's just so accurate. You have to have an MVP, you have to stay thin, and you have to check that there's a product market fit, that you're not running ahead, and that there's actually people on the other end who are going to buy, and you have to keep it lean. So that's another one that jumps to mind. There's also Chase Jarvis. I'm a huge fan of creativity. So I love listening to conversations with people who are tapping into their element and are ready to be brave and be creative. And I think we can learn so much because at the end of the day, we're all unique. And if we tap into that, then magic happens. Um, yeah,
What
there's
other
more.
favorite books do you have? Noah, I don't know if you listen on Audible or you read, but
Oh, yeah.
what are some of the other
Wow.
favorites?
I gotta tell you, like, I never thought I would be able to listen to a book. It seemed to me like you sort of get lost in the audio. And for years, I've been listening to books, and I'm completely hooked. And I love this is probably not going to be surprising, but Bold by Peter Diamandis, the futurist. So that's also a book that made a huge impact on me. Again, around moving the needle, making an impact, identifying problems, seeing how you can overcome challenges. I love Stealing Fire by Stephen Kotler. Um,
What about Ronan,
what?
your co-host?
No, I know, but
How did you meet him and talk
that
about
that
some lessons from there?
sure, yeah. Ron is a very good friend of mine, one of many paths. We've been co-hosting the podcast for years, and I actually met him during my law internship. I started to promote parties, so I was actually promoting some of the parties in a bar that he owned, and we were also doing creative campaigns for that bar. So we got to know each other and we became friends. And then years after, we were also collaborating in business projects. And then we started doing the project. And I think Ronan is like a creative genius. So you have to just talk to him to see how he thinks differently. And he's always approaching things in a very creative way. And he always has this little bit of wisdom to inject into a conversation. Nothing is ever normative there. It's always unique. And when you listen, you really feel that he's onto something. So I'm very lucky to have him as a partner.
No, I want to talk about some stories, some success stories, because so people can understand a little bit more about what you do. And maybe we can start with business blocks.
Of course. So Business Blocks is a company that we helped actually sell a few years ago, and we won the HubSpot Impact Awards based on the work we did with them. And what we did with them is we helped them get to their target audience through a very targeted inbound marketing campaign. they were selling courses to small businesses. So we researched to understand exactly what the pain points are of those businesses. And then we created this online survey for them, where they actually got a sort of course through what we created, where the online businesses had to sort of filter answers to where they stand with respect to their marketing and finances and all these other aspects of their business. And then they got a very detailed response with tips on what they can improve. And the idea was to sell the Business Box courses. And that was a huge success. So many customers converted through that campaign. I will say it's less complex than a very heavy B2B campaign. The decision-making process was not as long as a complex B2B tech, but that was a huge success, and they got sold, and we won the HubSpot Impact Awards based on it.
But I'm looking at it, and people can check this out alongside me on Bold Digital. You can check out some of the resources. There's a case studies page that kind of goes through some of these things.
Yeah.
What was interesting about the Business Blocks one is talk about the partner webinar side. You have some really big companies here. What do you your thoughts on partner webinars?
Oh, I think it's a great way to get in front of more relevant audiences. So if you map out your ICP, your ideal customer profile, and then you realize what tools they use and where they hang out for information, and in general, what other companies maybe complete what you offer, and you're able to collaborate with those companies, then you can really grow your reach to targeted audiences. And that's what happened with Business Blocks. So they were doing partner webinars with companies such as GoDaddy, that obviously is relevant to small businesses, and with Square, and with ZenFits and NerdWallets. And through that, they were able to expand their reach and generate more leads. And of course, it's a co-webinar, so also it helps the other company. But typically, if you do it with a larger company, then it's more the value is more for you. But those companies, the value that they get is that once you offer quality content, then everybody wins. Like they maybe don't get leads, but they get value for the audiences, which is what companies that get business actually want to do.
How hard is it to get in front of a GoDaddy or a Cabbage or Zenefits to do a partner webinar? And you mean, I don't know if they started with a huge list, right? So they can, Business Blocks wise, could say, listen, we have this huge list. How do you get in with some of these companies, or what's the approach?
I think it's like the approach for PR. At the end of the day, you have to come to approach them, grab their attention, and then offer something that stands out. But as with a lot of things in business, it's also about personal connections. So I honestly think that it's about first maximizing those. Same with journalists, same with almost everything. It's like with also, no matter how much value I bring to companies, word of mouth will always prevail. So that's the case here too. So if you know somebody at that company, or you know somebody that can introduce you, that's going to work much better than if you email the relevant POC and get a sequence on it.
Noah, I want to be the first one to thank you. This has been fantastic, hearing your journey, your lessons. I want to encourage people to check out bolddigital.com to learn more. You could check out the podcast, reallifesuperpowers.com, and on obviously any of the podcast channels. And just thank you so much. It's been amazing keeping in touch with you and connecting with you over the years. So thank
you so much for the stage and for keeping in touch all these years.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Noah.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I feel like 100 grand.